It is time for our annual PlayStation predictions discussion. I will first grade myself from last year, see how well I did, and then give 10 new predictions for what I think is going to happen with the PlayStation business throughout the 2024 calendar year. Alright, so as always, timestamp right there if you want to jump to the brand new predictions, but first, let's grade myself from 2023. And folks, let me tell you, not looking good. A lot of stuff either did not happen at all, or it went in the complete opposite direction. But having said that, we always begin with the sales predictions. So at the start of 2023, I said PS5 at the end of the year would be at 58 million consoles sold worldwide, and PSVR2, a brand new platform that we began tracking and looking at, I said 2.5 million. Now, we always have to do a little bit of guesswork because we don't have firm numbers immediately. We'll get those relatively soon, at least for PS5. But in the case of PS5, we do know we have a recent number directly from Sony, which was 50 million as of December 9th, which you may see that and go, okay, I'm way off. Well, I'm off, but not by nearly as much because there's still 3 weeks left in the holiday season. There's a large volume of consoles that are going to get moved. And if we do compare this to PS4 on a launch line basis, we know PS5 throughout the entire year was trailing behind PS4 ever so slightly, but it was catching up until December 9th, where we learned PS5 is now only days away from catching up to PS4, and we can look back at previous financial reports, see that PS4 eventually did sell 53.4 million at the end of that same time frame, which is about 3 years after launch. So that means realistically PS5, assuming it did finally exceed PS4's rate of sale, it's going to be at least 53.4 million, probably best case scenario 54, 54.5. So I am off. I was very bullish on PS5, and a lot of those numbers were, based on a report from Tom Henderson a while ago, but they were still likely going to sell a boatload of consoles this year. It's probably still going to be a record for Sony in terms of how many consoles they are going to move, but it was not nearly as much as I was thinking. Now, PSVR 2. This is the problem where, we started tracking it, but I don't think we can really stick to that because the only thing we have is Sony telling us that initially it was like 8% selling faster than the original PSVR, but we also had a chart showing us that the sales curve was already flattening, so it seemed pretty obvious that it was probably not going to keep up with the sales pace of PSVR, which, it pains me to say, but, I don't think this thing is, even close to 2.5 million. So, in terms of, the answer, I guess we could say less than 2 million confidently, really maybe less than 1 million. If we look at PSVR, that took about 8 months to sell 1 million units. PSVR 2 been in the market for 10 months, and this really depends on when or if Sony wants to tell us how well it's doing. They're not really obligated to do that, so I really don't know where we go from here, but what I think we can say is I was not only wrong, but probably very wrong on that. But going into our more standard affair predictions, number 2, I said slim PS5 with detachable disk drive launches in September. Leaks beforehand. Disk drive costs $100 and no PS5 Pro. So we can kind of pick this one apart and go, this was right, this was wrong. So slim PS5, detachable drive, that was all true. That was based on Tom's report, so it's not like that was really all too surprising. Really, the one thing I was sure of was it was going to leak beforehand, and that is exactly how it happened. I even said it was going to be a spy shot or some sort of console shell that we see before Sony makes a formal announcement. That is exactly how that played out. The disk drive attachment is $80 MSRP. I'm surprised by that, although an indirect price increase was the digital model being $450, which I think a lot of people maybe did not see coming. And I said no PS5 Pro, which is true, but at the time I said, because this was before we had more concrete evidence that PS5 Pro does exist, I said, we're not going to see it, we're not going to hear about it, we're not going to get any rumors, but that was not entirely true because we are now finally getting rumors, and it seems like we may get the console for this upcoming year. So that was kind of 50-50. Number 3, though, I said PlayStation acquires Deviation Games. What an interesting turn of events that was, because not only did it seem fairly obvious throughout the year that Sony was breaking up their relationship with Deviation Games, they were hit with, nearly 90% of the company was laid off, but now, recently, we're seeing that the company is poaching former employees from either Deviation, Treyarch, Jason Blundell is at the studio now, or at the company now, and we don't know what exactly they're doing, if they're building a brand new team, if they're, simply playing a support role. That's all speculation, but it was not a matter of them acquiring Deviation Games. Now, more a matter of that's just how the business goes. Maybe they didn't like whatever, Dave Anthony was doing at Deviation or the direction they were taking that game. Again, it all goes into speculation, but my idea at the time was, that's what Sony's been doing a lot of, is investing in these new studios. So seemingly they're doing that in a different way. It was not acquiring Deviation. Dead wrong. Number 4, I said Sony makes a strategic investment in Square Enix. This did not happen. And I should clarify that many of these I still think are bound to happen at some point. We're not going to do a bunch of repeat predictions, but, I still think that's a realistic, viable thing that's on the table. It did not happen this year. Number 5, I said, or last year, I should say. Number 5, though, Activision Blizzard deal stalls. Microsoft continues to fight. Sony continues objecting to the deal, and having to go back and see what I said exactly. It was I think this thing's not going to go anywhere until, into 2024. We did see the deal stall past May and June. That was the original time frame for the deal to close. That was, of course, a whole ordeal throughout the entire year with, going through the CMA, the FTC. There's still an FTC thing that's ongoing and everything, but the deal did officially close, and Sony was objecting all the way through up until the very end, where they did sign a deal, but they're still obviously not exactly happy with the outcome. Either way, number 5 was mostly wrong. Number 6, I said new PS2 emulator arrives with basic save state, rewind, and video filters, and the rollout for the game lineup is still slow, so a PS2 game here or there or whatever. Obviously, this did not happen as well. I still expect it to happen at some point. It's simply a matter of I don't know when, and really I would be incredibly disappointed if, we don't see it this year or really in the foreseeable future. So I'm not going to comment too much on this particular prediction, but I expect it should happen eventually. I was wrong on that. Now going into number 7, Sony returns to the E3 timeframe with a major live stream or showcase. Now, I think we might have to stretch this a little bit, but I was kind of right in the sense that they held a major showcase on, May 23rd, 24th, somewhere around there. So that's about 2-3 weeks away from that standard E3 time frame. But that's essentially what I was getting at. The thought process at the time was, a lot of Sony studios and third parties, they just were not ready to do a showcase the previous year. And so, I'd mentioned all throughout that time that we're probably going to see something next year, and it seemed like it was maybe going to be something where Sony would return to that original time frame of it's not E3, but it's that E3 window. They were the first one out in late May, so really depends, but that was still a major live stream showcase, even though it was an underwhelming one. Number 8, Bloodborne PS5 and PC confirmed for next year, which would be 2024. So we would already know about it, and we know that it's coming out this year. Nope, not correct. I still think this will happen eventually, but it's, of course, an absolute shame that we're still here and no Bloodborne. I mean, it's just the sheer, principle of Sony's not that dumb. They often can make questionable decisions, but we know even with the the Insomniac breach and seeing that, okay, this game sold 7 million something units, we always knew it was a high million seller, right? It didn't break the double digits, but gosh, I can't believe they haven't done anything with this just yet, but I'm sure something is moving behind the scenes. It just seems like whatever is moving is further out than we are thinking. Or at least I'm thinking. Number 9, Sony Santa Monica teases their new IP with no release window. that was MIA. But we'll talk about that later. Number 10, I said a UI refresh comes via a system software update around fall. Still no themes. So we got plenty of system software updates throughout the year. We did have a substantial one in the like the fall area. I forget exactly when it went live or something. In terms of like a proper UI refresh where like the sort of design language on the PS5's home menu, I mean, that did not change at all. It principally still looks the same that it did when it launched in 2020. But we've seen them make changes to the activity card system and things like that. So, I mean, between that and quality of life improvements, nah, I don't really think that counts. But we don't have themes. And I still think, and I will always remind people, when it comes to themes, there is no place for a theme on PS5. It would have to override the entire design language and principles of how this thing was presented, with most games taking up the entire background. In theory, that's where a theme could go, but I think they designed it in a way where they don't want to support or offer themes anymore. They're essentially pulling a Nintendo. They're going to go the whole cycle, not offering them, at least in the case of how Nintendo does it versus Sony. There is, things to look at on the UI versus, what Nintendo did with the Switch. But I still think we're probably not getting them, although I hope I'm wrong for those that do eventually want themes. But that is 2023. So, I mean, not great, but a lot of those, I think we're just still behind on when they're eventually going to come at some point. And there are some where, I was dead wrong. Not even close. But now let's get into the very exciting 2024 predictions, starting with sales. I think PS5 by the end of this year is going to be at 75 million consoles sold worldwide, which is still a very good number given we know that, yes, they're finally exceeding PS4's rate of sale. I expect that will continue, but not by that much because this is still the console market that we're talking about. So, there's still a ceiling in terms of how many consoles you can reasonably sell out there. So it's just something where I don't expect it's going to balloon well past PS4 within the same time frame. PS4 did 73.6 million, so it is doing better than, or I expect it will do better than PS4, but I just can't see it doing that much more, right? Even, considering that we should be getting a PS5 Pro this year, but based on the timing of when that comes out, it may not really make a meaningful difference in terms of the overall numbers. And plus, PS5 Pro is very likely going to be a low volume console anyway, just meant to increase the average spend per customer and keep for customer retention as well, right? So just something where I think 75 million, that's about where it should be. So we'll see how we do there. But PSVR 2, so I mean, I don't know what we do other than, I guess the best way we should approach this is I'm going to throw out a number which is less than 2 million. And the way we'll judge this is if we get one updated sales milestone, because it seems like that's what they might do is here's a number, and then that's it. Then they won't talk about it, until the following year or something, right? Or they may never talk about it. But this gives us a bit of room, so that's how we'll judge it. If we get a new number, we'll just say, is it lower than 2 million or higher? And that'll be the right or wrong. I really hope I'm wrong, because that would mean PSVR 2 is doing really, really bad. And I don't want that to be the case. I love PSVR 2. I love VR in general. I'm a huge advocate for the space, but we have to be honest, and it seems like the headset probably is not doing all that great, so I'm going to go with less than 2 million, which would put it well behind PSVR at that point. But that goes into our number 2, which is a PlayStation VR2 price cut. The base headset will start at $449.99, and game bundles, if there's a something that they're offering with more than a game or more than 2 games, something like that, we'll say that the general MSRP for that will be $499.99. So about $100 off across the board, depending on the bundle. I mean, there's really not even that many bundles right now anyway. They're still likely dealing with the same initial production run based on the base headset and then the Horizon Call of the Mountain bundle. So it just seems like they are going to have to get to that point where if they want to start moving these things, they're going to have to cut the price. So I expect that will happen, and I hope that it does. But going into number 3, Eric Lempel is named the new president and CEO in April, which April is when Hiroki Totoki is expected to sort of take over that position as interim CEO and Jim Ryan leaving. I think what we're going to see is that either just doesn't happen because they name the new CEO immediately, or maybe just a little bit after. That's around the time where they do that stuff anyway. So I had always thought it was going to be Eric Lempel. That was one of the first names I threw out there. I still feel quite strongly about that. If anything, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it was maybe Lentau, Hideaki Nishino, Toby Morrish. These are all SVPs at the company, and so that's what they'll likely do, is hire up internally, and it's probably going to come from an SVP, but I always felt that it was probably going to be Eric, and we'll see if that is going to be correct. Number 4, though, PS3 games begin leaving PS Plus Premium game streaming, or the entire game catalog, I should say. So the thing is, we've always been mindful of this, which is, PlayStation Now launched in 2014 with those custom PS3 server blades where there's like 8 SoCs on the board, and those are what we've been playing PS3 games off of for going on 10 years, right? So a combination of 10-year-old server blades. I do not expect they're making new PlayStation 3 server blades. Also based on game contracts, right? I mean, whatever sort of long-term contracts were signed 10 years ago for all that third-party support, and also just the financial upkeep of these servers and the interest in general, which, Sony has that telemetry. I'm sure not many people are actually playing those games. I think we are looking at games expiring, I guess, kind of en masse. We'll use the word en masse. That might not be really truthful. I mean, the final count that we have right now is about 321 games on the catalog. So 321, pin it. We'll see what the catalog is by the end of this year, going into 2025. But I think we're going to start seeing games just leave, and we're clearly not going to have new ones on there. Not something, too, where it's like, oh, first-party title leaves, then it comes back, which they did during the relaunch. Conceivably, the first-party stuff is probably going to stay, and that's how they'll maybe bolster those numbers, because they'll bring back Killzone or something. But I think largely this should be expiring, and they're not going to have a new answer for this in the short term. Like, they're just going to leave, right? And that's just, unfortunately, how it's going to be. Going into number 5, another PlayStation showcase. This time, I'm going to say in either March or April. I want to say March, but that should set the stage for late 2024, 2025, and beyond. So what I mean by that is, we're right in the middle of the peak years of the console. They're selling a boatload of these things. So it's really about, keeping customers engaged, and more importantly, showing what that back half of the life cycle of PS5 is going to look like. And, another unfortunate reality is that our last showcase just was very underwhelming. And that was one where I thought for sure, like, oh, that's it, because we're right in the middle of peak years, or rather, that was like the start of it. But, this should be where they're going to show off a ton of things. And they showed off a few things, a lot of it just those standard cinematic trailers, and a lot of people can't really get excited about things like Fair Games and Concord, which is completely a reasonable thing to say, but I get where people are coming from, where it's like, where's the transparency? Why aren't they talking? And they do things much differently nowadays, right? In terms of when they decide to announce, when they're ready to start the marketing cycle for a game, when they eventually ship something. So we know they handle things differently. So it's hard to say like, like we're in this panic zone. Ring the sound the alarm, PlayStation's in trouble. We just can't say that given how they've been doing this, right? But this should be the year where we see more meaningful announcements. And so that goes into my number 6. We'll throw 2 of these in here. Ghost of Tsushima sequel is revealed, coming 2025, and Santa Monica's new IP is revealed, no release window. So I will run that one in here again. I think it should be how I expected it last year is still how I expect it when they eventually show this thing. I don't think by the time we see this new IP, it's going to be some sort of, here's all this gameplay and it's super ready and it's polished and it's coming, here's a release window. I just don't think that's how we'll see this new IP. I do hope I'm wrong, but I don't think that will be the case. But Tsushima, I feel like that is going to be our 2025 game or something, that they can show that. It'll be a meaningful trailer that actually gives us some, like a reasonable look at the game, and that is something where we can say for certain, 2025, there's a big game that's coming out. But as for this year, number 7, I'm going to say Team Asobi reveals a new Astrobot game, can be played in 2D or VR, and it's coming Q4 of this year. I think we're going to have a nice little surprise turnaround for this game, where it could also be like a budget title, let's say $50, but it would be a really exciting prospect for Team Asobi to come out and say, here's this full-scale Astrobot game that everybody's been asking for. It's not, sort of paywalled behind a headset that a lot of people didn't get the chance to play with Rescue Mission on PSVR 1. And maybe it would be super cool if that also was bundled in as a PSVR 2 version. I don't expect that, but that would be really nice. But just something like that, right? So everybody can play it. But there's also a VR2 version for those that want to play and experience the game like that. And, it would be great to just sort of have a quick turnaround on that game being revealed in March or April during a showcase. And then, hey, guess what? Only, by the end of this year, you're going to be playing this game as well. Now, going into number 8, PS5 Pro is revealed in September, ships in November, and is priced at $599 USD, US dollars, baby. I think it's going to be the same timeline from what we saw with PS4 Pro, so it will be announced a little bit early compared to like these slim console redesigns, which means they're susceptible to seeing the leaks come out where we get a console shell from a factory or something, and that's a very real possibility, obviously. But I find that it will probably be the same footprint of reveal in September, wait a little bit, launches in November, and in terms of like what it's going to be, I think most of what we're hearing is probably what is going to end up being true. The sort of marketing approach for this thing is going to be the RT hardware baked in, new SDK features for developers to where having this in-house machine learning resolution upscaling technique that is also going to sustain higher frame rates. And so, I think that's kind of how they're going to build this thing as a very premium, like first-class way to start playing PlayStation 5 games, which is also going to come up with a, that means it's going to have its own slate of games that are going to have PS5 Pro modes. So that could be something where games that they announced or revealed earlier this year between first party and also third party, right? There's going to be partners there as well that are going to be showing this thing off. This thing should have a very meaningful reveal and showcase, and in terms of the pricing, it will very much be a premium device. I don't think Sony is going to be afraid of that price tag nowadays, right? It's obviously memed up with 2006, but that was a long time ago. The sort of market conditions are a lot different nowadays. This thing was always going to be low volume anyway, and so I think they're going to have no problem selling a PlayStation 5 Pro at that price tag. So that's what I expect there. As for number 9, Sony makes a surprising, uncharacteristic acquisition, which could be either, something like, and these are names that people were throwing out before, right? CD Projekt Red, Arc System Works, MiHoYo. MiHoYo actually, I think, is a reasonably, that would be massive in terms of the amount of money and bringing them in, but the thing is, 2-3 years ago, and I always said this for the last 2-3 years, which was, those don't fit Sony's sort of, how they go about acquiring studios. They're either partner studios, they've got a long-form relationship with them, or more recently, it's a brand new studio, and Sony likes to invest and build studios organically. But I still find that was true back then, right? I don't think they would have acquired those studios back then. The only reason I'm changing my tune now is because now the conditions are different, right? So based on external factors, which primarily is Microsoft, Sony has to think about these things when they've picked up 2 massive publishers. So, I still think it was not the case a few years ago. Now it is. And these studios, if one of these gets picked up, right, then I guess we'll consider this right. But generally what I'm kind of getting across here is that whoever they pick up is going to fit in with their portfolio in a way that, they're missing something currently, right? And that's why people always were throwing out these names of like Arc System Works for fighting games, and we know Sony, invested in and bought Evo, having a Western RPG studio, MiHoYo with mobile. So, these things all have their own place where they do fit in a meaningful way. Like, I still find that an investment in Square Enix would make a lot of sense, but just for number 9, let's go with that. This is going to be the year that we have our first true uncharacteristic really surprising, like not a Bungie thing where, oh, they're independent and they want the live service talent. I think this is where we'll finally see something big there. Now, number 10, our last one, a PlayStation PC client is finally officially released. This is the beginning of Sony's PC ecosystem with, having a launcher, buying games direct from them if you want to, but also a proper PSN login to start earning PC trophies, PS Plus streaming, just consolidate that all into one PC launcher and client. And, whether it's like, I think actually I expect it to be like not great, a very 1.0 app where like PC gamers will probably hate it. I probably would dislike it. I'm sure many people would say, oh, this thing's broken or doesn't work or whatever the case is. But it'll be the start of Sony, stepping into the PC landscape and building that ecosystem for not only maybe a PC customer that doesn't really have much experience with PlayStation, but also a very engaged PlayStation customer as well, right? Being able to log in and, start reaping the reward of the PlayStation ecosystem on the personal computer. So that's what I think is going to happen for this coming year. And so we tried to cover a lot there, right? A little bit of games, a little bit of the platform cycle, and we always try to have a good spread on what the company is going to be doing. But generally, I do think to speak broadly for the upcoming year, this is something where it is a very high volume year. A lot of PS5s are going to get sold. I think we could do tons of predictions about a lot of the third parties I expect them to partner with to fill in those gaps that are probably going to very much be in place for this year, because we are still working with a 2-year gap with COVID, about a 2-year gap for a lot of studios. I can sympathize with many when it comes to, oh, Sony's not talking a lot and what's going on with their first party studios, where are these games, but it's not a problem unique to Sony. Every studio is dealing with this when we're talking about games that take 5, sometimes 6, 7 years to make, and there's a 1.5, 2-year delay from COVID where they're sort of relearning how to make games under those conditions. It's just unfortunately that's where we are, right? And so Sony will probably be doing more third party. We will see, or we should see, some of that first party stuff this year. We're gonna get new hardware. I think there's a lot that we should be excited for, and I hope we do see that actually play out for this year. But we had a really fun 2023. Thank you all so much for joining me throughout all the things that we did, and surely we'll be doing a lot more going into this year as well, right? So hope you stick around, and we've got a lot of very exciting things to talk about every Friday on Let's Talk PlayStation, but also anything else that we do on Tuesday. But that is pretty much it. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in my next video. You take it easy.